The first noble truth, life is suffering. Ooh, what a title. I don't mean to sound so dire. But it's, well, the reason I decided to call it the first noble truth, life is suffering, is because I watched a documentary this afternoon about a family, and they had 8 kids, and 3 of the kids have autism, not very severe autism, mild. They're like high functioning autism, and most probably the dad had autism as well, and the family, it was 8 kids, and this wasn't because of the kids with autism, it just happens to be that I said that, but the dad had depression or had maybe manic depression or something, I'm not sure exactly, and then he killed himself when his oldest child was 16 and his youngest child was 4. And it's like the effect it had in this family. And I didn't realize, like, when I watched it, what it was going to be about. I just looked up like documentaries on autism. So I didn't know that it was not really that much about autism. It was about all this other stuff. And it was just, like I could just see from watching it how generational trauma is passed on from one family member to the next, to the next, to the next. So all the kids were really traumatized by their dad killing themselves, but also most would be traumatized before that because he had like this manic depression and like could be like really hyper, really super intense, really happy, really angry, and also really like sad as well. And this obviously has a big impact on the kids. Some of the kids, the impact is so bad. Like one of the kids, that the child is suicidal, and it's so interesting. In her letter she wrote a letter to her dad after he killed himself, and she said, like, now I have to make myself die in order so I can see you again, or something like this, or now I can only find you again in death. And then it's kind of like she became that, like she became suicidal. It's really interesting, the psychology. But anyway, when I was watching it, I just realized like so many humanity is suffering, like so many people are suffering. Like sometimes I think I go into like cognitive dissonance where I try to, because there's a part of me that feels very happy. Not all the time, I can also be sad, but there's also another part that's like, this is it. Like I think I overlook it, that most probably the majority of society is in hell. Like if you think about it, in the West, like how many people do you know that are happy, and like not by trying to like overlook it like with glamour eyes, like how many people report to you that they're happy, or how many people report to you most of the time their problems. And most probably in the West, we are the ones that have the life the easiest. Maybe means that people in the East are more happier, but you can imagine there's so many struggles and challenges coming from poorer countries as well. Like so much more death and war and famine that's witnessed. So if the impact on the father killing themselves is so drastic on one family, like imagine coming from countries where you're seeing it more regularly. Maybe you get a better perspective on it. Who knows? But yeah, most probably society is in a lot of suffering. I feel it too. Because you can feel it when you're out and you're about and you're with people, their energies. they're not happy or that they're in a lot of stress. And the Buddha said the first noble truth is the recognition of this. When I was younger and I was into Buddhism, I really recognized it then. Now it's kind of changed because there's awakening and all these things changed. But when I was younger, there was like this moment where I could really recognize that life is suffering from my own perspective, and also looking out at other people. Now I suppose now there's a part of me that wants to not see that. So there's some humbling in me that's like, okay, people are really suffering. And it's such a humbling moment when I was younger and I realized that, because it's basically saying the way in which we as humanity, as a society, as a community live our life, the way in which we look at life is suffering. So our society is suffering. That humanity is suffering. And then the other noble truths go on to I've forgotten the noble truth suddenly. I am terrible with my memory. Four noble truths. Obviously everyone translates them differently. So if it's different from your interpretation of it, then it doesn't matter. So this one says, the Four Noble Truths, the center foundation of Buddhism. Number one, suffering is unavoidably accompanied of physical existence. All life is suffering. Oh, so they say all life is suffering, where I say, well, humanity. I don't see life as suffering. All suffering is caused by desire. All personal desire, all ambition must be extinguished by the person who wishes freedom from suffering, and it can be extinguished by walking the path. The path which leads to freedom from suffering is a narrow path. Do not be self-confident about your spiritual progress unless you have reached to the very extinction of desire. So that's one perspective on it. Let me just read another one so you can get like a good overview. The Four Noble Truths. Life is suffering. Suffering is caused by attachment to desires. Suffering can be ended by the overcoming attachment desires. The way to end the suffering is the noble eightfold path. The nature of suffering, suffering's origin. So number one is the nature of suffering. Number two is the suffering's origin. Number three, possibility of suffering cessation, stopping. Prescription. And then number four is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. Sorry, my dyslexia is coming in with the pronunciation. The Four Noble Truths. So just read another one. Life means suffering. The origin of suffering is attachment. The that freaking word. Cessation of suffering is attainable. The path of cessation of suffering. The path to the cessation of suffering. The Complete Idiot's Guide to the Four Noble Truths. Life sucks because you suck. If you suck less, then life would suck less, so suck less. You could replace that with F. Life fucks because you fuck. If you fucked less, then life would fuck less, so fuck less. Just going through a few of these. That one is too small to see. Okay. So dukkha, suffering. The root of, rather my binoculars, please no more cessations. The root meaning of Chinese characters for suffering is bitter. Happiness is sweet. Suffering is bitter. We all suffer to some extent. We have some malice in our bodies and our mind. We have to recognize and acknowledge the presence of the suffering and torch it. Oh, okay. The making of suffering, samduna. The second noble truth is the origin, roots, nature's creation or arising of suffering. After we touch our suffering, we need to look deeply in to see how it came to be. We need to recognize and identify the spiritual and material foods we have ingested that are causing the suffering, well-being, nidura. The third noble truth is the cessation. Cessation! Yeah, go Lisa! Cessation of creating suffering by refraining from doing the things that make us suffer. This is good news. The Buddha did not deny the existence of suffering, but he also did not deny the existence of joy and happiness. The third truth is that healing is possible. The fourth noble truth is the path that leads to refraining from doing the things that cause us to suffer. This is the path we need the most. The Buddha called the Noble Eightfold Path: right view, right thinking, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right diligence, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Okay, so maybe that's enough of all the four noble paths. But anyway, the point to it is the recognition of that suffering. Like, it's deeply, I know that sounds really weird, but it's deeply relaxing when that's recognized. The life that humans currently lead is suffering. The life of desire and attachment and separation is suffering. It's not going to work. What we kind of think is we'll just dabble in non-duality a little bit, and we'll dabble in the spiritual path so it makes our life better. But the life in which we lead and which we set up as a society is suffering. It's because our society, the way our society is set up, is based on suffering. Our very ideas, the fundamental way of which we grow children is based on suffering, is based on delusion. So our society isn't going to work. This isn't like a bashing, like, obviously we can change our society, but I mean, you're not going to find, what I'm trying to say is you're not going to find happiness in society. You're not going to find happiness in things, in material things, in getting and obtaining, in doing, in achieving. You're not going to find it in any of that. In a way, that is suffering. There's nothing wrong with getting things. There's nothing wrong with a desire as such. Like, desire is just desire. It's the way the body moves, and it depends how you mean desire. Like, some people say it's desire, but it's the attachment to desire. It's the attachment to outcomes. It's the belief that happiness, that my peace of mind is going to come from getting this or being this or doing that or having this, which is the lie. And then it's the recognition. So I think it's the third one, the way out of suffering, is the recognition that the freedom comes from presence. It always comes from presence. It doesn't come from a thing, not even really an activity. Because an activity, even like meditation or doing something spiritual, is the idea that it comes in time. All of these things can be beneficial for the person and relaxing, but really it's all about presence, which is already here, which is beaming through, which is shining through, and recognizing that that is your freedom, not time. It doesn't matter what happens tomorrow. It doesn't matter what happens next year. What matters is what happens now. This is the most important part. While the focus is on time, that happiness is found in time, there is always going to be suffering. I think in Buddhism they said suffering will come like the cart follows the horse. I used to like that. I used to say really like corny, simple sayings when I was studying Buddhism. Yes. So nothing in time is going to free you. Not a person, not an action, not a behavior, not a thing, not a getting, nothing. But we're so attached to that, and we're attached to our avoidance as well. Like, we've got to do this. We've got to do this because it's scary. We've got to do that because of that. And then we go to things in society to look for relief, but other people are suffering. So then it's like you all merge together in that suffering, in that like anxiety energy. And often we don't even recognize it because we've got a story of who we want to be, and then we've got what our actual body feels. I remember when I first got into Buddhism, it's like I had a story of what I wanted Lisa to be, and then I had what my body felt, and my body is like, ah. So it's also this like recognition, like what is it that my story is telling me about myself, and what is it that's actually happening now? And when you really pay attention to it, you'll notice that most people are in a state of anxiety because that's the way in which we're grown, and then it's genetically passed on, that you have to make your own happiness, that you're the doer, that it's your fault, that it's their fault, that it's my fault. And then you've got to kind of like survive in this world, which is like playing a high risk board game. Like you do this, but it might collapse, so you do that. So the mind's got all these possibilities of thinking that things that can go wrong. Like it's not like we're in a supportive society where people are supporting each other. It's kind of like we're in a society where people are competing against each other. People do support each other, and that does appear. But if you look at it from like a bigger perspective, you'll see that everybody's kind of like running their own game rather than us working together as a group. It kind of works, running our own game. It kind of works as the group thing, but it's kind of weird. It's not like ants that are all like making the hive together, or bees that are all making the hive together. We kind of like making the hive together, but we're all trying to get as much as we can. Like, can I get the most amount of nuggets for myself and sit on them? Huh. And then there's a belief that that will give you safety, which won't. There's just more anxiety, so then more dramas and things will play out. Freedom is not found in life. Freedom is found internally as you. Freedom is found here. Yeah, so maybe we go to questions now.